caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree. They got caught up.
Me and Pac went in the studio and did a song together. And then them little dudes.
Outlaws.
Yeah.
Outlaws.
They came, like, as soon as we got there, they came up to Pac talking about, yo, Lauryn Hill dissed you, Mobb Deep dissed you, this and that, and da. So then Pac went in the studio and started writing about, I think it might have been that, I think it was.
KRS is clearing up the misconceptions about the relationship between Big Daddy Kane and Tupac. And it turns out, much of what's commonly believed isn't accurate. According to KRS-One, there was no real conflict between Kane and Tupac. In reality, they had a mutual respect for one another. So why did it seem like the industry tried to pit them against each other? Much of that, he says, can be traced back to Suge Knight. Suge was known for crafting narratives, controlling the public image of his artists, and encouraging people to choose sides. The East Coast versus West Coast feud was profitable. It sold albums, boosted magazine sales, and attracted media attention. But Big Daddy Kane didn't want to get involved in any of that. Tupac, on the other hand, got pulled into the drama, sometimes unwillingly. KRS-One suggested that if there ever seemed to be tension between Kane and Tupac, it wasn't genuine. It was more about manipulation from outside forces than any real disagreement between the two artists. There was even a time when Kane was approached to join Death Row Records, but he declined. That decision alone tied him to a narrative he never agreed to be part of. Despite all of this, there was real respect between Kane and Tupac behind closed doors. They had conversations and even collaborated informally, though those moments were never released to the public. So now it's time to take a closer look at what actually happened between these two iconic figures.
Tupac is a lyricist. See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics that touch your soul.
In the mid-1990s, Suge Knight was working to expand his influence by launching Death Row East, a calculated effort to break into the East Coast scene. And to lead that expansion, he approached one of Brooklyn's most respected MCs, Big Daddy Kane. Kane later confirmed in interviews that he received an offer, including a $100,000 advance and a potentially game-changing deal. But Kane wasn't interested in becoming part of the industry's larger agenda. He declined the offer, making it clear he wasn't willing to be involved in that environment. This decision ultimately placed him in a neutral position amid the rising East Coast versus West Coast conflict.
Didn't Eric B try to sign you to Death Row East at one point?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
He called and said, Suge trying to, build a Death Row East, man. I think it might be a good look for you. So I went out there, and like when I walked in, these two big-ass Rockwallers came, and then Suge, he comes out the back. They come running around, sniffing around me and stuff, sits down with his cigar, sits his cigar down and does this. And both the dogs ran and sat down next to him. So I'm like, okay, this one of them meetings. He said, well, what you want? A $400,000 advance. Why you ain't just simply say $500,000? Man, you Big Daddy Kane, man. I can't see myself signing you for less than $1 million. I gotta give you $1 million. Because you already a household name. But then he was like, well, yo, look, I don't know how you doing financially, but if you want, I can just give you $100K in the morning. That's when I knew it was time to go. I was like, you just gonna give me $100,000 with no agreement? Nah, I was like, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then I went and switched my flight to like a 6 a.m. joint, got the fuck up.
Basically, early on that something didn't feel right, because no one offers that kind of money without expectations. He recognized the risk and chose not to compromise his values. But this wasn't only about turning down a deal. Kane's decision also served as a quiet refusal to be pulled into a staged conflict with Tupac. Although Suge Knight had plans to create tension between them, Kane and Tupac actually had mutual respect. KRS-One stated in several interviews that Kane never had any issues with Tupac. There was no personal feud. In fact, KRS-One pointed out that Kane and Pac shared more common ground than most people realized. Unfortunately, Tupac became deeply entangled in the media-driven East Coast versus West Coast narrative, despite his intentions.
The bottom line is that they got caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree. They got caught up in the hype. And Public Enemy prophesized, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. And they got caught up. Biggie, they all got caught up, and it's a shame because we ain't supposed to go out like that.
Kane, for his part, recognized Tupac's talent early on. He consistently stood up for him whenever critics questioned Pac's abilities as a lyricist.
Right, you know, you being a respected lyricist, how you feel about the people that push the narrative and say that Tupac, he wasn't a lyricist?
Okay, but hold up. Tupac is a lyricist. See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics that touch your soul. So I do consider Tupac a lyricist. You know what I'm saying? Even though his stuff is about substance, I do consider him a lyricist, because it's like this here. You have to be lyrical to touch someone's soul, to make someone feel like, yo, I don't know this man, but he knows my pain. You see what I'm saying? So I do consider Tupac a lyricist. I would never,
There's
ever...
also the lesser-known story of an unreleased track they recorded together titled Wherever You Are. Although the song never officially came out, it's proof of Tupac's lyrical skill. Anyone doubting his writing ability should hear that track. Pac held his own alongside a legend like Kane, but their connection went deeper than music. Both Kane and Tupac shared an interest in the 5% Nation, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. Originating in Harlem during the 1960s, the movement is rooted in the belief that Black people are the original people of the planet, and that true power comes from self-knowledge. It emphasizes awareness, education, and inner strength. Kane became involved with the movement in the early 1980s, and its influence is clear in much of his work. He often incorporated concepts like supreme mathematics and the supreme alphabet into his lyrics. For those familiar with the teachings, his rhymes carry layered meaning. For others, they simply come across as more refined and intellectually sharp. Even in tracks like The Wrath of Kane, you can hear references to the philosophy and ideas behind the 5% Nation.
The mathematics, you know, the 5% thing, you was kind of heavy in that, the knowledge itself. That was really woven into your rhymes when you first took off. When did you get introduced to that? Were you a 5%er or was you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I believe that I was introduced, I want to say 81, 82, somewhere around there.
It's, with this knowledge itself and knowing who you are, when you came in the game and during that era, man, knowing who you were and where you came from was important, man. You got a lot of that from the 5% Nation and your teachings, the first 120 and all that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you just said it, knowing who you are, you know, so I mean, you know, when you're studying your lessons, you're learning your history and, you know, your rightful place in history, you know, and things of that nature. So that was something that was very informative and helped to, you know, mold and shape me as a better person.
Tupac's connection to the 5% Nation was somewhat different. He wasn't formally initiated, but he was introduced to its teachings during his time in Baltimore and through his mother, Afeni Shakur, a former member of the Black Panther Party. He absorbed many revolutionary ideas early on, and themes like self-knowledge, empowerment, and resistance to oppression are found throughout his lyrics and interviews. So even though Kane and Tupac came from different coasts, and the music industry attempted to frame them as rivals, they actually shared similar values and beliefs. That mutual understanding helped build a sense of respect between them. Now, this is where things become more complex. Suge Knight wasn't just running a record label, he was highly skilled at shaping public narratives. With Death Row Records thriving, he understood that conflict attracted attention. The East Coast versus West Coast rivalry became a powerful promotional tool, and Suga didn't hesitate to lean into it. His approach with Kane was calculated. By offering him a spot on Death Row East, Suge was attempting to pull a respected East Coast figure into the broader West Coast storyline. Kane's decision to decline didn't just keep him out of the deal, it also positioned him as unpredictable in the eyes of the media. Suddenly, Kane was seen as someone refusing to take sides while most were drawn into the feud. And under Suga's influence, even neutrality could be interpreted as a bold stance.
You can't say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry, number one. People were starting to say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true people trying to make careers. It was people trying to get famous. It was people hustling other people out of money on the East Coast. You don't have no team, you need us. We from the East Coast, pay us X amount of dollars for protection. And some of these idiots was doing it. For us, how we looked at it is, we looked at it as we representing the West Coast, but we representing the ghetto.
Tupac didn't have the option to stay on the sidelines. Once he joined Death Row, he became Suge Knight's main artist, and the East Coast versus West Coast rivalry became closely tied to his image. Media outlets, magazines, television, and radio leaned into this narrative heavily. While Tupac was naturally outspoken and intense, many of the conflicts he had with East Coast artists were either exaggerated or deliberately created by those behind the scenes. KRS-One recognized this, which is why he consistently refused to engage with industry politics. He remained vocal about how the music business often exploited black artists for profit.
This place, this institution can never side with, come under, understand the exploitation of our culture. Never will you ever see me standing in the environment where our culture is being exploited. Or if you do see me there, the next moment this thing's gonna fall, I'm there to bring this shit down. If you see me in a situation like that, you should say, yo, watch out. Something's about to happen. Turn your cameras on. Something's about to go down. Why is Chris here? Why is he here? Something's about to, he gonna say some shit right now that is gonna, you know.
But Suga wasn't the only one pushing the East Coast-West Coast feud. The music industry in the 1990s had many players involved. Label executives, A&R reps, and media platforms all had financial motivation to keep the rivalry alive. Drama led to more record sales, boosted magazine circulation, and drove up TV ratings. Sometimes artists were even pressured to respond to others publicly, or their comments were edited in ways that made them appear confrontational. Big Daddy Kane and Tupac are strong examples. Both were talented and respected, with clear values and principles. Their personal interactions were rooted in mutual respect. Yet, the public was led to believe there was tension between them. Industry insiders, including Suge and his associates, understood that fans were drawn to conflict, and they capitalized on it. However, this wasn't limited to Suge or Death Row. East Coast labels like Bad Boy and other executives also contributed to fueling the narrative. What set Suge apart was his visibility and his forceful tactics. He often relied on intimidation, loyalty, and his reputation in the streets to control both his artists and the story being told.
All of that happened afterwards was a ploy, and it was manufactured by Suge Knight.
When you say ploy, I don't know what a ploy means.
Here's the thing.
It was a game plan. Right. It was a game plan to get him to go
it was
over
a
there.
strategy. It was a strategy.
So if you think about back then, Tupac got convicted of rape, he went to jail. That sucker Kevin Powell did an interview for Vibe with Tupac.
The writer,
Kevin
Powell. The light-skinned guy, I know him.
And Tupac said, Thug Life is dead. He said, I might be killed after this interview, but I want my truth to be known, right? And he's doing the interview, right? Suge Knight goes to get him out of jail.
Yeah.
When Suge Knight got him out of jail, it's the first time you heard Biggie and Puff did it. That whole East Coast, West Coast shit was manufactured by Suge. Suge did that shit.
But not the shooting. You're saying that.
No. I'm talking about
okay. Just to be
the
clear.
blaming of Puff and Big.
Yeah.
Tupac, with his intense personality and quick temper, ended up being an ideal figure for the industry's narrative strategy. Kane, in contrast, was more careful and chose not to be used. Still, even his decision to stay out of it was turned into a story by the media, often distorted from the truth. While public attention stayed fixed on supposed rivalries, the music industry quietly carried on with business as usual. managing contracts, taking percentages from collaborations, and pushing album releases. The East Coast-West Coast conflict wasn't just about music. It became a tool to generate hype, attention, and cultural influence. Executives like Suge understood that shaping public perception could be just as profitable as selling records.
That's a problem with Death Row and Suge Knight and Snoop and Tupac against me. It's a war. That's the most craziest thing I ever heard of in my life. I get no stripes for slapping a female. I don't hit women. Or I'm a prayer on the week. So how I'm a war with a guy who ain't no man? You know, I don't have nothing against nobody out there who doing their thing. You doing your thing, you do it. But don't do an interview and say, well, the biggest war is between Death Row and my company. Death Row on a whole nother level. If they had a problem with us, we don't have a problem with nobody. Everybody know where we at 24/7. Either at the studio or at the office. If there's an event going on, we're gonna be the first ones in the front row having fun. At the Super Bowl, we're gonna be there betting and cheering. So we're not the one hiding. There's a lot of people who make up like stories, try to get themselves famous. I get themselves some yellow power. That's the wrong way to do it. You know, if you're gonna do it right. If you're gonna be with Death Row, I want to do it.
And that's what makes the story of Kane and Tupac so significant. It highlights that the version of hip-hop history most people know doesn't always reflect the full picture. Executives who promoted the rivalry gained from the disorder, while the artists, often unknowingly, were caught in the middle of a larger profit-driven
But in the middle.
The East Coast, West Coast thing, it just got out of control. Dudes is getting killed, and I felt responsible. But I couldn't stop it.
We ain't mad at the whole spot in New York, we just mad at certain people. I got this new project coming out along with some other brothers called One Nation, and it's like an East Coast, West Coast collaboration to kill this whole new vibe everybody want to be on about it being a war between the East Coast and the West Coast.
Right.
It's really just a problem with two rappers. And the East Coast, West Coast thing is something that the journalists and people are making up just to get paid off it so it can drag out and everybody can have albums. They're perpetuating it so it can be drama. When it all go down, don't look at me and Biggie and be like, why is there a big East Coast, West Coast war when you're shooting this to 300 homes, 300 countries, telling them about an East Coast, West Coast war that they would never know exists. So that's where information becomes a problem. We both need to exercise greater restraint.
Looking back at the 1990s, it's clear the East Coast-West Coast feud wasn't simply about regional competition or personal conflicts. It was a narrative carefully crafted and pushed. With Suge Knight playing a major role behind the scenes, Kane and Tupac didn't fully align with that storyline, which is likely why their genuine connection has often been overlooked. Let me know what you think about the relationship between Kane and Tupac, and what's your take on the idea that Suge Knight and others in the industry helped manufacture the East Coast? West Coast feud for business gain? Share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.